As I mentioned before, there's a lot of interaction that can come from the controller in order to read and get from GUI components from the scene and then push information to the GUI components on the scene as well. And that's that. This is the exploration of that, but it really depends on the GUI components and what features they really are going to have. Now, there's a breakdown of three different distinct functions that I want you to look for when it comes to each GUI component and what options you do have from the controller. And that's the is, get, and set. These are all functions that are going to start off with those different, words. Is, set, and get. I bet you know what set and get is going to be, but is, well, we'll go over that here in a second. But all of this is going to be inside the API, which I'm going to show you here in a second. And that's just going to be able to tell us specifically on, well, what we need from that GUI component that we can use in the controller. So let's take a look at that real quick. So I've gone to the APIs and, well, we're going to take a look at the button, well, Java's components for this button. You've seen this hopefully before, but there's a lot of great information on here. Number one, right at the very top on what we would need to import to include our button into our GUI, which we've seen before. We've seen button before, but a couple other things here. Sometimes it's helpful on what code, but this is the only code that it really gives out, which is really going to be the next step from here on out. But anyway, so as we move on here, here's all of the different functionality that we have with this. And really, I need to go all the way down to method summary or all the methods that are inherited from other parts, well, of button. So what I'm going to do real quick, which is really important, remember you have three different styles of functions. You have the is, so I'm going to do a space and then is. And then you'll notice all of the is's that show up, but also really importantly, as we scroll back down to the functions, you'll see all of the is, well, functions that we have as an option. Notice there really isn't all that many. Is disabled, is disable, is hover, which is a whole nother, is visible. So notice there isn't too many things that we can actually check about a button. Now I'm going to do the same thing this time with space get, and you'll notice there's a lot more features on what values we can get from a button, and then set. And notice there's a lot of things that we can get from set as well. I mostly look at the last one before we get into the property details. So we have methods inherited from scene node. I'm going to go into set text is there somewhere. I always seem to miss it. And then set text tells me, here's the bad part. I mean, Java tells you what the function does and what it returns and all that stuff. The text to display the label. This text may be null. That's great. But it doesn't show you how to code it. So in reality, what I would do is really do a Google search on button and then JavaFX button and then set text. Now the bad part is there going to be some functions in there that, well, they're going to be a little bit harder to find. But let me do this one. I don't like that one. Let me try this one real quick. Seeing JavaFX constraint. Yeah, so notice, okay, there's a couple of nice things right there. So you can find the items on setting the text for this pretty quickly and not too hard, at least for this one. But there are some other ones that are a little bit more difficult to do. Let's just put it that way. So there is an extra added step that you're going to need to know, at least need to do, I should say. And that is just find the code for it to help you kind of figure out what we need to do for the other functions that you have with this button. Now, while the API gives us the exhaustive list of what features we can have per GUI component, all I do is put a couple of examples, example set, is, and get methods that might help you in your process for whatever item that you happen to be using. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I had a button, a checkbox, and a color picker. So if you happen to be using one of those, great. But again, you'll notice that there was some of the same functionality between different components, so the overall code's going to look very similar as well. But use the APIs, and then the APIs are not going to help you when it comes to example coding. That's the only bad part. So there is going to be a step where you're going to use the APIs, see what features and functions you can use, and then you're going to have to Google what, frankly, the actual code is in order to do that. So, yeah, it's going to happen. It happens to me all the time. So just a heads up when I get to that.